Well, hello everybody. I'm Ken Lashley, and this is Juan and Juan. This is the art of collaboration. Most of the time, most of us always have to collaborate with somebody, no matter what kind of work we're doing. But especially, it's true in comic books. Comic books is absolutely the most collaborative thing I've ever done. What we're going to do today is we're going to go through one of the major projects that we've gone through. I am doing a cover for Batman 100, which means that Juan has to do it too. That's just how it works. So what we do most of the time is I do pencils and inks, and sometimes guys do pencils, and they hand off to another person does inks, another person to do coloring. But as the world is faster immediacy, they're kind of pushing pencilers like myself to work in a digital form. So I'm one of those old school guys who always only works in pencil and ink and paper and all that stuff. But I've been trying to use Fresca and using some of those programs to just straight out try to make it a little faster and make it more cool. So what I've done in this one is that I've done this one in digital format with Fresca. I did a real quick sort of thumbnail sketch, and then from there I went back to paper, old school paper. Whether I use paper sometimes is because there's also an aftermarket where people start thinking about they want originals, and you think about those things as well. But the reason why I do it is because I still like to scan it, and I can still make some edits, even at the very, very final stages. As it's just about to give it off to one, I can still edit it. But I could even do it when it's all finished, and I say, oh, I forgot to draw a finger, or I forgot to draw a boot, or I forgot to draw a hat, or something I forgot to do. So what happens is, working in a digital format gives me the sort of like the latitude to be able to make those changes. In the old days, it was just hopefully the colors could fix that, but otherwise it was off. It was go. So that's why we see those old school mistakes in the 70s, 80s, and even in the 90s. Those are all because we don't have time to go back and fix it. So one of the things I like to do is introduce myself. As I said, I'm Ken Lashley, work with Juan. And why I decided to work with Juan on this project is because Juan and I were working on a lot of different things. We do all the packaging art for the X-Men line. We've done some work for Lucasfilm, DC Comics, Marvel Comics. We do covers together. So we're sort of known as a team. So every time he's like, oh, Ken and Juan. So I thought it'd be perfect for me to work with Juan on this thing. So, so here we go. So first off, I did a quick sketch. Now the sketch is done in very loosely, sort of like you get an idea of what I want to do because I work extremely loose at the first part. The reason why is I like to keep the energy for the last piece. So what happens is sometimes people go, oh, I want it to be really, really tight in the beginning, but to me that's kind of wasting energy. So this is what I'm going to do, we sort of rough it out, and then we go to the final. So here's the final. I'm actually going to show you the original final. So this is the final image that I actually drew. So this is 11 by 17 sheet of paper. Batman is here at the bottom, and I did this traditionally because I wanted to show exactly how I do it normally. So this is all traditional art, and then I scan it. I usually scan it at, Juan says he likes it at 300 DPI, but that's kind of how I have to scan it. Sometimes I scan it like I did. We were doing this project for DC, and it was 1200 DPI, what was insane. But usually it's about 300 DPI. I finish at 300 DPI. I scan it, and then I do a couple processes over top of it. Everyone's different in that way. I make it color saturation levels, do all kinds of stuff like that. But just make it as dark and black as you can be. Sometimes I forget that I didn't erase all the gray, and that's when Juan comes in and saves the day. Because we really don't have a lot of time, and most of the time covers are about 3 days tops. We usually don't have a lot of time, and that's from me getting the phone call, me getting them the pushback. Sometimes there's more time for them to pick which one they want. It is this time that one I have to finish the artwork. That's just one of the ways that you do it. So one of the things that we go, the next part of that is, because of the size of restraints, we're trying to get it done as sort of like making it as good as possible within the confines. We don't have 3 weeks. We don't have 2 weeks. Sometimes it's 24 hours. Sometimes it's even closer than that. And sometimes it's like, oh, it's a Thursday and we need it for Monday. That, of course. So that's what happens. So it is one of those things where you try to be as brilliant as you possibly can within the constraints of the job. But that's kind of how it is. You have to be really hustling. So what we do from now from here is once I get it all scanned and I clean it as much as possible. I'm not really good at cleaning. He'll tell you that. You know, I mean, I'm okay at it. I make it sort of nice. I make it, well, if I can't see the gray, then, you know, whatever. Right? And then Juan takes it from there. So Juan will take it from now and I'll tell you exactly what he takes my lackluster pencils and makes them amazing, makes them great, makes them amazing. And then all of a sudden, everyone says, oh, Ken's so good. But I'm always making sure everyone knows that there's more than one or two people that work on a cover. They always say it's Ken Lashley this and Ken Lashley that, but it's not just that. It's collaboration. Like I'm doing one part of it, maybe two parts of it. Maybe I get to do the pencils, maybe I do the inks. Most of the time I do the inks now. And then Juan is the one who has to deliver the final file. So he does all the technical part of it. I do a little bit of technical part, which I didn't like to do at the first of my career. I was very reluctant to do it, but now I love doing it. I've learned a lot of skills digitally and how to do things. So I'll pass it on to Juan, and Juan will tell you what he does from there. Go Juan.
Hello, everybody. So I'm gonna talk to you about how I take Ken's amazing line art because he is an amazing artist. So let's get that straight from the beginning. But yeah, he does a really good job cleaning them, contrary to what he told you already. But sometimes, and this is just the nature of the game, sometimes there are pencil marks, and that's all that I have to clear out. Just a few little pencil marks. But yeah, this is my process, and here we go. We start with the scan of the line arts, which Ken sent to me already cleaned up. So as you can see, the blacks are already pretty solid. But I want to go in there and make sure that I take away as many grays as possible. I really want to have a lot of contrast between my whites and my blacks. The reason being is any gray tones that I have will make my colors a little bit muddy. So I want to make sure that my colors show through as clear as possible, as I intend them to, but without taking away the energy of Ken's amazing line art. So yeah, we start with the black and white line art scanned in, and I start out with some levels just to clear out as much as possible. But I also like to take it a step further, and I use my dodge and burn tool. The reason why I like the dodge and burn tool is because it's a great way to either darken my blacks or lighten the whites without affecting what Ken already did. As an example, we're zooming into Batman's face here. If you look around his mouth area and his left eye, we see a little bit of the pencil markings and a little bit of gray tones. So I'm going to go in there with my dodge tool, and as you can see, I can get rid of those marks, but we retain all of Ken's line art. From there, we're going to want to separate the blacks and the whites so that we can put some color behind it. Now, a lot of people like to use layer modes and set them to multiply. There's really no right or wrong way to do any of this. Everyone's got their own way of doing things, and as long as you can get to the final product the fastest, that's what's going to work for you. That works for you, so that's fine. I like to use my channels to separate the blacks and eliminate my whites. So what I do is I select my entire canvas. Don't forget to unlock your layer because you're going to want that background layer to be empty. So unlock the background layer, and you're going to cut the line art out of that layer. Then we're going to go into our channels. We're going to open up a new channel, which is going to show up as the alpha. We're going to paste our line art into that channel. After that, we're going to use the dotted circle to select the blacks from that channel. We're going to go back to our layers. As you can see, when we use that dotted circle, you're going to get the marching ants everywhere where there was black. That means that your line art is selected. And then we're going to go into the empty background layer that we had, and with the paint bucket, we're going to fill in the selected area, and now we have our line art completely solid black, and the whites are completely transparent. There's nothing there, it's empty. That's going to allow my colors to show through, and there's other benefits that we're going to get into pretty soon. And now we start adding colors. As you can see, I've already got a background layer with some color on it, and the first step is the flats. The flats, as we call them in the industry, they're just separations that are going to help us distinguish all the different parts and elements in our piece. You know, if it's the hair, the skin, the eyes, the pupils, teeth, everything. Batman's cape, his shirt. I want to make sure I get enough contrast between everything that's in there so that I can use my magic wand, select what I want to work with, and I can work within that piece or that area without affecting anything around it. I usually like to start with darker, desaturated tones. Like I said, there's really no right or wrong way to do this. Some people like to start with mid-tones. Some people like to start with highlights and they shadow everything. I see it more as if I'm sculpting the piece by adding light to it. Therefore, you know, like you can see in my image right there, dark desaturated tones. And now the fun part begins. Now I'm adding the details. I'm doing all the rendering. As you can see, I got Batman in the bottom, and we got Punchline, our new villain, center. Another thing that I do that it's a little different from other colorists, I like to start coloring the characters first. This is the focus of the piece. This is what the client wants to sell. So I want to make sure first that my characters look as best as possible. I do use Ken's information with the line arts to know where the light's coming from. Some people like to start with the background because that way they have a better understanding of how it's going to affect the characters. In this case, Ken already gave me some information as to where the light's coming from, so I'm using that to render my characters. Once I have them all beautifully rendered and as best as possible, we can move on to the background. Oh yeah, here you can see that I not only use a layer to do all my details and do all the rendering, but I use extra layers to add shadows. I use different layer modes. For example, multiply will help me add shadows to my piece. Another thing that you will hear about is how many layers should I have? Well, I prefer more layers. The reason being, I've got more control. That's one of the beauties of, you know, Photoshop and the technology that we work with. We work with clients that can sometimes be picky, and you know they're paying for the product, so you got to do it. And if they want something to change, it's a lot easier to have it in separate layers, because if I flatten my details onto the flats layer, it's a lot more difficult for me to change my colors. So I usually tend to keep things separated to have more control. Okay, now remember how I said I like to have my blacks in the channels, separated by channels. One of the things that we can do when we have our black lines separated in the channels is we can change the color of that line art. We call it color holds. I like this because it helps me give the piece more depth. Usually when things are closer to the viewer, there's more contrast. So we're going to see darker line art. We're going to see, you know, a good separation between the blacks and the colors. And if I start changing the color of certain lines, you're going to start pushing them further back in the piece. For instance, in this piece, we have the Joker, who is like a superimposed image. He's a ghostly figure in the background. I changed the tones of the line art this way. It is very clear to the viewer that he's further behind them. He's probably not really there, obviously, by the size of him. But yeah, here we see the line art is now a darker blue, but it's not a solid black. And now we add some details to that background, and the piece is starting to come together. One thing we can do to spice things up a bit is use effects. See, I'm starting to add some glows. Another good thing about having separations, look at how I can separate our main characters in the foreground from, you know, the Joker who's in the back by adding a bit of a halo around her. It looks like the light's coming from behind. You can see a glow around her. I've got a little bit of a stroke also to help me separate her even more. And oh yeah, another thing about collaboration. Sometimes the client wants to add more things. It's the beauty of having layers. By this point, if I'm coloring this, Ken's already working on something else. So in this situation, I was asked to add something to her vest. In this case, it was some stitching, some blue stitching that you're going to see that's going to appear right on top of it. But
That I forgot to draw. Let's be honest.
no, you didn't forget to draw. The clients.
Sometimes you're hustling and you're like, oh, I forgot to draw. That's what I'm talking about. Perfect example. Like I forgot to draw something on the chest, and something else happened. I think your pockets or something else color wise, and instead of me going back and to draw it and rescan it and send it, I said, hey, Juan, could you just do that? And he said, ah, no problem. It takes him way less time than it takes for all three of us, me and him and the editor to worry about these little things. So the editor said, oh, I forgot this. Then I said, oh, shoot. And then Juan said, I got that.
Yep.
Right? So that's how it works.
And that's one of the beauties about Photoshop, you know. I've got the ability to do that for you, and we can get this done a lot quicker. The client's happy, everyone's happy. The final product looks amazing. And oh yeah, here we go. Even more effects. I wanted more separation between Batman and the background, so let's bring in some smoke. And it definitely has a more dramatic effect, more separation. Now I'm really guiding the viewer's eye with my warmer tones on the main figure in the center. We can still see the Joker right behind her, but your eye is still focused on her. But all these effects in the bottom are bringing your eye down, and you're starting to read that Batman's down there. And here we see yet another addition to the piece, which was amazing. It was like an afterthought. Ken had a feeling that we needed a little something extra there. And he had this idea, you know, I wish I would have drawn some of those ha ha ha's that we see in the back going over his shoulder. So I automatically said, hey, I got this. Don't worry. It's a great idea. And I selected some of his art that was already in there, and I duplicated it, and I used it to make some more of those ha ha letters that we see behind the Joker going over his shoulder.
It really adds a lot to the piece, even though it's subtle. And it just makes it, from a nice cover to like, oh, that's really cool. It's kind of funny too, like when you look at it all together, it looks like they look like haha spider webs, but where it looks more like scratching, like with a knife, which is kind of interesting. I just like the way it looks. It's a little,
Yeah, no, it's amazing the things that we can do, you know, with the
yeah,
program. It's
but
something that occurred to you last
yeah,
minute,
exactly. But what's
and
also cool about it's also really cool about doing collaboration like this is that you reach a point where you trust each other. Like I say, well, I trust that I don't have to check it again or to say anything to him. I know that if he says, "Oh, I can do that," then I just go on to continue what I was doing, and he always makes it look great. And also, one of the things that is interesting that a lot of guys don't do, or maybe they do, they tell the world who did what. A lot of guys just take credit for other people's work. They say things like, "Oh, yeah, I'm brilliant." But the truth is, I work together with Juan. So Juan helps my work look better, and then and in return, when I always get an opportunity to work on something, I always recommend him. Right.
yep,
So much so that even now when I get work, they just assume that I'm going to get one to do it.
yeah,
So it works out, and we're doing some other cool stuff, and we've always got some really cool stuff in the burner, and maybe we'll come back and talk about that as well. But just some really cool stuff. Working together is the only way things get done in a high quality way. So
yep.
we love working with people that are talented and do some great, amazing work and make it look good too.
No, it's definitely a treat to work with Ken. Um, One of the benefits that we do have working together is that we've been doing it for a few years. So we've got this chemistry where a lot of times he'll send me stuff, and I already know what he wants. I already know how to work with him. It's different when you start working with someone new and it's a new adjustment. But in our case, I think we make a great team, and
Hmm.
it shows in the product, in the final product, and our clients are always happy.
So,
And I think that the piece at this point is pretty much done. One thing that I like to do before I call it finished is I like to go. I always think, how can I make this piece just a little bit better? Usually, it's just a matter of adjusting some levels, make
mhm.
things pop out a little more. In this case, if you look at the image, I changed her skin to a more pale tone. After looking at more character references, I brighten her up a lot more so she stands out a lot more.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, There it is. There's a finished piece.
That's awesome. How many hours of work is that, would you say?
This piece was definitely one full day worth of work. So I want to say anywhere from 8 hours to 10 hours.
Mm.
That's usually what I strive for when I'm doing a cover.
Yeah.
Um,
It's funny because people ask me how fast it is and how long it takes me to do things, and I hate telling them that because they think, oh, you're so fast and you're so crazy, and I'm like, well, okay, I'm different from most, but mine usually takes my part of it. The pencil part probably takes about the same, about 6 or 7 hours,
yeah,
depending. Sometimes faster, depending on the deadline or what
yeah.
I got to get done. But it's good to know that you're not spending more than a day of work on it, because I think that's one of the misconceptions that people think that we're taking so much time. And we could take that much time. We could.
And
Like there'd be
sometimes we have.
sometimes we have, right? It's like, oh, this takes longer, but the longer it takes, it just seems like it's a loss because you're not getting paid more for doing it
Yeah.
slower. So it really is like, let's just get it done and get going. And that's why most people in the comic business don't have long careers. It's not because they don't have the talent. It's because when deadlines are given, they're kind of trying to make it everything, the greatest they can make it. When the reality is they need it the best you can make it in a certain amount of
Yep.
time. That's really what has to happen. So you only have really only have 2 or 3 days, you know, because it just really comes down to that. And it was tough for me at first because I was really like, oh, I want to make this the best it can be, but it didn't quite work that way.
Yep. Well, they say in this industry, time is money, and when the client needs to go to the printer, they need to go to the printer. If they miss that deadline with the printer, it's going to cost them money. So if you're taking too long, you're costing the client money.
True.
So you just got to make sure that you can get it all in there within your time frame. Like you said, sometimes we can do it in one. I can do it in one work day. Sometimes it takes a little longer. If I do have the luxury of time, oh sure, I'll take it. I'm gonna make the piece as awesome as I can. But if the client says they need it by Thursday, they're gonna get it on Thursday.
That's how it is. You know what I mean? But okay, one of the things I've noticed in collaborating with other people is that sometimes we don't talk to each other. Like sometimes they just don't talk. They just here's a piece Tuesday. But I think it's good about one is when I'm working with him or whatever DC or wherever company, like we talk to each other, without them talking to us. So I say, oh, this is what I was thinking, and he'll say, oh, this is what I was thinking, and it's good. And this is outside of the realm of talking to the editor. And then the editor may come in with some notes, and that's fine. And we always adhere to those notes. But the notes that we really listen to the most are between the two of us. Like I say, well, this is what I think, and he'll say, oh, okay. What about this? And I go, oh, well, that's really cool. And then I'll say, oh, sometimes I'll say, oh, I saw this in a magazine. What do you think of that? And they're like, oh, that's wicked. And then we go back and forth. But I really think that the biggest part of collaboration is listening to each other and saying, hey, this is what I think, this is what you think, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. And also, one knows that I'm not a super tech savvy guy that can do all these things. So what he does is, he gives me that room to ask silly questions. And I think that's part of the world that we work in, especially digital work, is that you have to be able to, ask questions, fall on your face, click the wrong button, like, oh shoot, what does this do? Or take chances, or like, oh, what does this do if I do this and this, right? Because I don't know everything there is, and I think I'm the best supporter of digital tools because I went from traditional tools where I didn't want to learn because I was been working for 10 years or 15 years as a traditional penciler, and then I said, well, if I want to learn, I want to keep working and do other stuff, I've got to learn other skills. So the Adobe products were for me were the easiest because they're right in front of you. But I also had a Cintiq that's right behind me in my shoulder that I didn't use for a year, because I just was afraid to use it. And I realized, no, I just got to keep going and just try it. And now I use it. I use it every day. I use it every day for all the things that I got going on, like all the drawings I do, or the sketches I do. I use that, or my iPad Pro. I have a ton of digital tools now that I didn't have 5 years ago, that I just wouldn't do 5 years ago. I had somebody to do this for me. I had somebody to do scannings for me in a studio. Then I realized, well, get those things, learn those tools, and I think that's one of the strongest things is not to being afraid to make a mistake with any tools that are digital, even with pencil. Like I draw in ink, I just draw straight in ink, and I try to do the best I can. But truthfully, you got to go for it.